Cybernation Uncensored.
All right, hello. Let me know if you can hear me and my amazing guest. Talk for them for a little bit.
Hello.
Let us know. Volume okay? Yes, no, maybe so. I hope so.
Hopefully they can hear us. If
That
not, well, again,
we're
we're
just
back to the
gonna,
funny faces.
voguing. That's what we're gonna do. At least it seems like nobody's saying that they can't hear us yet in the chat. So I'm just gonna go ahead and get this thing going. Oh yay! Fantastic! Thank you, Stink Palm. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Power Word Talk, where we have introspective discussions with phenomenal writers, artists, and creators to discuss their personal journeys and the amazing work that they do that leaves a positive impact on our community. I am your host, Utahime, and before we chat with our fabulous guest for today, I'm going to do my usual brief little shout outs here. I am community manager and producer here at Cybernation Uncensored. We have a wonderful community of just awesome, talented people, really, really friendly, wonderful, welcoming community that we would love you to join. So I have the link to our Discord here. If you want to go ahead and join our lovely community, we would love to have you. We have lots of different shows on a weekly basis. We try to keep everything updated. So please also too be sure to follow us on all the social of the medias, because we are everywhere. That's including YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, everything. So please be sure to follow us. Show us some love. Be sure to rate our podcast, because we have those too. And I'll put that in there because these also too, our Power Word Talk episodes are in podcast format as well. But yes, we just appreciate all that you guys do as far as showing support on our weekly shows. We also too have to shout out our amazing sponsors like Sirenscape, Fantasy Ground, Studio Gate, Modifius Entertainment, Lion Banner, and Lake Battle Maps. Lastly, our wonderful patrons. We would not be able to do all the amazing content that we do on a weekly basis if it wasn't for your awesome love and support. So thank you guys so much. I'll be keeping an eye on chat as I usually do for our streams, just to see if you have any questions or comments. I'll try to sprinkle those in for our guests. But let's get into it, because today we have the wonderful Logan Boese with us, and I have had the honor of playing in one of his amazing Coyote and Crow campaigns, and he's currently running a campaign here on Cybernation Uncensored every first and third Tuesday of the month. It's been amazing watching that, and if you have not seen it, it's on our YouTube, so please go check it out, comment, and like all of those videos, because it is a fantastic group that he gets to lead on this amazing journey through Cahokia. But enough about that. They want to hear from the man, the legend himself. So if you don't mind letting everyone know your pronouns, who you are, a little bit about yourself, and we're going to get right into it.
Sure. My name is Logan, and my pronouns are he, him. I'm an indigenous writer, actor, graphic designer, and a whole bunch of other things from the Absalaga tribe. And I was going to say I had the lovely honor of having you join my table. Because again, it doesn't matter if I sit here and tell the best story in the world. Without players to do so, I'm just waffling on and on to hear myself talk, which I do quite enjoy, but
I mean, that's why you're here, right?
Yes. You were like, hey, want to come talk about yourself? I was like, I'm already there. I will wait in line.
I love it. But I'm so happy. I'm really happy that you could join me today. And we want to just get right into basically the beginning of your journey, because you've mentioned a lot of different things that you do, like the acting, your writing, and your awesome storytelling. So how did that all come about? Which one came first? Were you already writing at a young age, or were you involved in theater and dramatic arts?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious looking at me that I was a theater kid, but
As was I.
but so I like to say that I was changed amidst stacks of role-playing games, because I was. Like literally when I was 3 or 4, my parents were still playing Vampire the Masquerade, the first edition.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, my name is Logan, and I am in fact named after Wolverine, so I never had a choice. I was always going to be a nerd.
I love
Um,
that.
and I kind of blame that for why I'm like 5'5", because I just kind of grew into the name and never kept growing, and I am in fact short and mad about it. So, which is really annoying because most Absalaga men top out around 6'5", 6'6", and
Oh
I
my
have a cousin
goodness.
who's like, "Yeah, I'm the short guy in our family. I'm 6'1". I'm like, "Fuck you! I will come for your fucking kneecaps, and when I've taken them, I'm gonna punch you in your face.
Just like right at the kneecaps, just like little stubs.
I'm gonna climb Mount Asshole and beat your ass. That's what's about to happen here. All right."
Oh my
But
goodness.
so yeah, I was always going to be a nerd. And then as I got a little older, of course, I stole my mom's Vampire the Masquerade books, and I was actually
Yes.
reading them in like my very Christian small town high school. Uh, everybody else is sitting around doing science. I'm the kid in the back reading Vampire the Masquerade
And where
for
did you grow up,
fun.
by the way?
I grew up in a small town in Kansas.
Oh
It's called
boy.
Atchison. Ever been? Don't go. You're not missing anything.
I was like, I
Nothing
have
but
no, I have not heard of that town, unfortunately. But maybe it
it's
is
got the
fortunately. I don't know.
it's got the spirit of Kansas, which is basically that it's the most haunted town in Kansas, and teensy bit of racism. But
Oof.
when I was growing up, the word colored still flew there,
Oh
especially
no.
if you were over a certain age. Like, oh, that's just grandpa. It's like, oh yeah, grandpa's something, all right. Uh,
No
but
good. That's yeah, that's bad. Very bad.
Uh, and of course, I got involved in theater at a certain
Hmm.
age. I think I was 12, 13, 14 when I
Awesome.
auditioned for A Midsummer Night's Dream. I was Changeling Boy. It was delightful. Uh, After that, I really joined my town's only, because we were
Hmm.
small enough to have just one, D&D group, and that was back when we were still playing second edition. So
Oh, so it's been
uh,
a long. It's been a while
we
then.
were a late adopter. Technically, third was out. I think 3.5 might have been out. We just hadn't changed over. Eventually, we did change over to 3.5. And I just played with them for years and years. We played D&D, we played Vampire, Werewolf, all the old World of Darkness
Hmm.
stuff. To this day, well, recently, World of Darkness has become my second favorite world, but I might be a little bit biased. But like, yeah, I still love the World of Darkness. I have tattoos from it. I've talked at great length about my favorite clans before,
Which we
Malkavian
will
and
be getting.
Nosferatu.
Yes, we will be getting into that too. Now, as far as were you, it's obviously since you were involved with tabletop at a young age, did were you already DMing, GMing, and that kind of got you into the more of the writing area, or was it just the writing came a little bit later after all
So,
of those things?
um, I was a longtime player. The first time our DM didn't show up, everybody was like, "Okay, you DM, no, you DM," and eventually it was decided I DM because I was the one who couldn't run away fastest and got tagged with the books. Um, Literally, one of us took the books, and like the first one to get touched with them was going to run the game that night.
It's like
Uh,
hot potato for DMing.
but around the same time, I found this lovely little website called Gaia Online, and I role played on that. It's a forum website. At the time, it was dedicated to anime. I'm sure it's still around, though I haven't been on in several years at this point. But I just did lots of play by post role plays for years and
Yeah,
years and years. I made some really good friends. I'm still in contact with a lot of them, actually.
that's
Um,
awesome.
and eventually, that kind of, I'm like, I'm not a good writer. I can't do it. And,
Hmm.
classic creative stuff. And, but eventually, it was only during the pandemic that I actually decided, you know what? I made multiple 5,000 word posts on Guy Online a day. Neil Gaiman writes 1,000 words in a day.
Hmm.
I got that topped. If I write 10 times as much, maybe eventually I'll get a book out. Still haven't yet, but had a lot of fun.
Yeah, but you're still putting out your work and writing and doing the thing, which it takes that first step to then get to that point where you're like writing full novels or whatever you're writing, autobiography perhaps. But no, that's awesome. So it was like that guy online and writing in that forum leading you into more of the writing space. I had no idea. That's awesome.
Yeah, and in the middle there, there were several years where I was writing for magazines. I was doing mostly copywriting work, like writing copy and
Mhm.
editing. I've done so much editing, so much proofwriting. Um, Actually, I don't want to say I love it, but it's at least easy. Um, because at that point, you're not even writing your own stuff. You're just making sure that what they wrote is
Mhm.
readable. Um, so I've done a lot of that too. Like right now, I'm still working with several publications. Like I'm a regular contributor to a place called A Tribe Called Geek. I occasionally put out stuff in like digital and print magazines. Like I think I've got something coming out in Vampire magazine soon.
Yeah, I think I saw the
And a couple.
pictures for those on your website, which I'm going to make sure to
Mhm.
put those links so you can go ahead and follow our amazing guest here.
Please and
Uh,
thank you.
and I think some of those articles are on there. So, what have been the main focuses for a lot of those pieces?
So one of my favorites, just because of the conversations that it started with me personally, was there is no Native American Dracula. And I laid out three criteria for what
Hmm.
makes a vampire. I stated that uh, there were, to be a vampire, you had to drink blood,
Hmm.
you had to have been human, and you had to transfer with a bite from human to whatever this thing is. And within indigenous cultures, there isn't anything that ticks all three boxes. There's a couple of things that tick two, but uh, there's nothing that ticked all three. And at a certain point, while you'll see in mythologies all over the world repeating patterns because
Yeah.
people come up with the same kind of fears, and a lot of those myths deal with our fears like that. That's why we have so many dragons all over.
Yes.
Um, there's no vampire, and assign a to assign the word vampire to something in
Hmm.
indigenous cultures is to take a Eurocentric lens to it,
Yeah.
and you kind of just continue the cultural erasure.
Hmm.
Um, like there's and indigenous cultures have enough of their own myths and legendary that already doesn't get talked about, or only certain parts get talked about.
Yeah.
Like
There's so
there's certain
much.
there's certain cryptids that we all have heard about,
Yes.
which we really shouldn't talk about because cute Robert Tables.
I'll see
Um,
myself out. Oh my gosh. Is it true vampires bite on the neck solely because they
I'm
are
stealing that just for the record.
necromancers?
We'll call it a
Uh,
door fee rather than a ban. Um, but yeah, um, when you bring up an individual culture, specifically indigenous ones,
hmm.
there tends to be like most people know about the cannibal sky spirit or the
Hmm.
flesh strollers, both of
Yes.
which you shouldn't ever say the names of. You shouldn't even really think them if you can avoid them. But that part gets left out of any appearance in modern media.
Hmm.
And in a lot of cases, they shouldn't be in those stories because it's not their story. They
That
just
makes
needed
sense.
a
Hmm.
monster of the week or what have you. And nine times out of 10, a werewolf, a vampire, something else
Yeah.
would have done just as well. And there's an argument to be made. Well, at least people are thinking of it, but are they really thinking of it, or are they thinking about it like it's as authentic as Taco Bell, basically?
Yeah. And being respectful to the fact that, if you're not supposed to mention these, like it's a cultural thing, and to basically bring it up in such a public way, that's a violation of,
Mhm.
just I feel like someone else's culture that you're saying that you appreciate, but you're actually doing the opposite.
Oh,
which I think that
absolutely.
a lot of people don't realize. But it's important for people to be aware.
Absolutely. And it's the kind of thing where for the longest time, I said, well, poor representation is better than
Mm-hmm.
none. And I said that pretty much right up until 2020 because that's when we actually started to see good representation.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we started to see things like Reservoir Dogs and
Yeah.
Tanis from Letterkenny. And actually, she came out several years before that. And there's
Mm.
so many other
How
things.
did you
Like,
feel about Prey, by the way?
I fucking loved Prey. Prey was amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I enjoyed it. I watched it in the Comanche dub because
I didn't even know
and
that was an option.
yes, it is.
Oh, I want to
Um,
rewatch it because it was so good. It was so well done and so beautifully shot.
oh, it really was, and it made so many people so mad.
I'm
And they're
sure.
like, how could this one little girl with sticks and stones when this commando with all the modern tech? I'm like, okay, number one, your problem here is that she can't do it with flint and stone. Like Arnold's tech, it's made pretty explicit. Like modern day firearm technology against the Predator might as well be sticks and stones.
Hmm.
It's so far advanced that there's literally like no difference between
Yeah.
a rock and multiple bullets from whatever gun he had. I don't care. Um, but yes, I loved that's I think the most important thing about it that it
Hmm.
was made available in a Comanche dub.
That's
And you
awesome.
can't just go into you actually have to look on Hulu for the Comanche dub. It's a
Okay.
separate
That's why.
video.
Got it.
Um and it's it's a really important thing. I think it's a really important step because it's part of that push for better representation. Just because so many native languages have been lost to time
Yeah.
and um like I can tell you that the Apsalaga, or at least the Apsalaga, have a language conservancy. They have a push to get their language
Hmm.
digitized and make it more available because we lost so many native speaking elders to COVID.
Yeah.
Um, and different tribes lost different people, but you're already staring at native languages are already endangered, number one.
Hmm.
And there's hundreds that are literally extinct or
Yeah.
close to extinct. And I think anything like the Comanche dub is something that is incredibly crucial towards
Definitely.
the survival of the culture because, as my native language instructor said, when you lose the language, you lose the culture. And I think
That
that
is so
is,
true.
mhm, because it's one of the first things that, well, even in the residential schools, they would teach you not to speak your language
Hmm.
because in taking away that language, you take away the culture. And this is true in so many other instances, which I am not qualified to speak on, but they exist. Um, and uh, yeah, there is. Um, so, Robert Tables, that's something that's been brought up a couple of times. What's a good way to bring out these stories? I actually got
Yes.
asked that at Gen Con. Were you there at the time, Utahime, or was that when I was talking to them later? When the lovely white couple came up after I was talking to.
I think that was after. I think that I
Okay,
missed that conversation, but I would love to kind of hear your take on that for sure.
so um, ah, so what's a good way to bring it up? I had this question asked at Gen Con, and my first response is don't. Um, when you're talking about things that you're specifically not supposed to bring the names up, don't use those things. But if you feel like you absolutely have to, if this story serves them and they are the only monster, the only enemy that gets across your narrative, don't use the name.
Hmm.
Don't use the name. Um, Give them a different name if you can, but just don't use the name because, and honestly, that makes something scarier anyway. Because if you
Hmm.
say, oh, the thing over there is a werewolf, that's a lot less scary than saying it's a blood starved beast.
Yeah.
Um,
Or like the nameless. And you're like, what
mhm.
is the nameless? Like, what does that mean?
If
Why is
you
it nameless?
9 times out of 10, if you just describe something, it is so much scarier than if you just use a name. If you describe how something appears human and then it twists and becomes something bigger, something more monstrous, and it hulks over you with sharp fangs dripping and, claws the size of knives just inching towards you. That's a lot scarier than
Mm-hmm.
just saying the werewolf is coming towards you. And that's what you can do
Yeah.
when you're using that story. Session zeros are an amazing way because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, I am a native voice. I am not
Yeah.
speaking for everyone, and there's different arguments, and people will say, well, we can leave certain parts out if it keeps the culture intact. And
Yeah.
that's an argument that I am not going to sit here and say, nope, that's wrong. No. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And I think it
Uh,
also too is brought up in the Coyote and Crow book where there's a whole like where it's usually on a side section where
mhm,
it kind of talks about for non-native
mhm.
players and GMs or story guides how to kind of go about doing things in a very respectful way, which I think is always important, and I really love that that's there. So then that way, people who are you don't have to be afraid to
Oh,
to
absolutely.
do these stories that take place in a colonized world. You don't have to shy away from it because you're like, well, I don't know, I'm not native, so it's like no, there's a way to do it and not it be respectful to the culture and to the people.
Absolutely. And I'm actually really glad you brought that up because that's one of the things that keeps people from playing Coyote and Crow.
Hmm.
Um, it's oh well, I don't want to play brown face. All right, you're not.
Yeah.
We are literally throwing open the doors and saying, "Come in, join us.
Hmm.
Let us show you." And there's a lot of things throughout the book. And honestly, the big rule I have for it is be as respectful as you can.
Hmm.
If and I've met people like this. I have met people who legitimately thought that Native Americans either didn't exist or no longer
Yeah.
existed, that we were made up or extinct. And I have met almost a dozen people who have gone through the American education system and believed one or the two or some combination
Yeah.
thereof. And as ridiculous as that might sound, but anyway, if you are a group in Ohio and you are a group of, people who have never had any experience with these people, um, and the only experience you have had with Native Americans is that scene in Peter Pan. And so, to you, the most respectful thing you can think of is to cover your safe in red face paint. I'm not going to get too mad because you don't know. You don't
Hmm.
know. And we do our best in the book to, kind of
Explain it.
explain. But at the end of the day, if you're making an honest attempt, I and a lot of other people in the community went straight to Ohio.
Yeah, it's like wait, you're hurting me. I'm in Ohio.
I've
We know
got
you're
much
you're
worse
not you're not
associations
that
with Kansas. I at least
Pluto
think
clan.
Ohioans can be taught. Um, but so I'm not going to get too mad. Most other people aren't going to get too mad. We're gonna try and make it better, but we're not going to like sit here
Yeah.
and crucify you over it because we're natives. We have better things than crucifixion. I'm kidding, somewhat. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
and I think if that's one of the things stopping you from playing Coyote and Crow, I appreciate that 100%. But please play the game.
Yes,
It can
please.
only help.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's a good way to like learn more, and
it
it's
is.
a combination of various indigenous communities who contributed to the book. And so you have a lot of there's that overlapping of some of the different traditions kind of being similar and some being different, but it all being shared within the world lore, which is amazing. And I know that you are very, I mean, obviously, and we've been talking about it already for, for a little while, as far as just like you being, very proud of your heritage and how much that kind of, that has always been basically an inspiration for your work and an influence. At least that's what I'm feeling.
It
Um,
really has. Growing up, um I knew that I was different because
Hmm.
everyone around me was kind enough to let me know. Um,
They do. They
but
really make it clear.
they do, especially in places like Kansas, because you don't see a lot of faces like this, and this isn't even like um, that obviously native. I mean, it. I am obviously native for anybody who cares, but in those places, they tell you from the time that you're very small that you're strange, you're weird. I
Hmm.
thought for years that I had broken my nose and forgot about it. It wasn't until I was a full grown man 2 years ago in my 30s that I figured out this is called a Roman nose,
Hmm.
and it's just how certain noses grow.
Yep.
And it's I've had so many experiences like that. You know, I love to tell the story about the first time I realized that I was actually a POC because I was sitting in a group, my favorite acting troupe in Los Angeles, and the director was talking about, and we're finally getting some more POC in here. And I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, we have a POC. Who's that? And every face turns towards me, not really sure if I'm making a joke. And I'm like, oh, oh, oh,
Hmm.
oh. And I'm suddenly sitting there and like, oh, wait, that explains a lot. Because I knew that Native Americans were people of color and I knew I was Native American.
Yep.
I never put two and two together to get four. I had two and I had two, and those are some pretty twos. Uh, but,
Yeah.
and it's something that, my mother explained when I was still a child because
Hmm.
Pocahontas came out because that was representation for the longest time.
It was. I
And
remember being like, that was the first time I saw any character that looked like me. And not understanding, even as someone who is part native, just obviously we know why there's so many issues with Pocahontas, but at the time it was just be having that desperation for like there's a
anything.
character that looks like me, like and so you get excited and you dress up and you're like, yeah, this is a part of our culture, but then it's like, but
And then you get older and you find out a little bit
there we
more about
go. Yeah.
Pocahontas, and you're like, oh,
Oh
damn.
boy, yeah.
And then you think she was even more ridiculous within the narrative of the story, assuming it was all unproblematic, that she chose John Smith over Cocoam.
Hmm.
But that's neither here nor
Yeah.
there.
And Coco
And
was hot. I'm just putting that out there. Just saying.
agreed. But actually, Pocahontas was the second time I saw a face like mine, because I was lucky. The video store where I grew up had old copies of Brave Star,
Oh.
which is an old filmation program.
Mm-hmm.
Came out right after He-Man, and it features a Native American lawman in on the planet of New Texas. And it's not the best, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot better than you'd expect representation wise and more progressive than the 80s would have you believe. Um, and I got to see that and I fucking loved it. Um, and Pocahontas came out and mom explained, like, no, you're Native American and your Crow tribe. And she tried to explain more, but she was basically a stolen child.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't have a whole lot of explanation. That was before she ever got a chance to reconnect. Um, and it's just, it is a thing that influences a lot of my work because it's a thing that influences a lot of my life,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more of my life than I realized. Because, growing up, I'd be walking around with friends and, the friendly small town cops would talk and they'd always talk to me. And I just thought they were being friendly. Uh, the fact that I was the most melanated in the group never quite trickled in.
Yeah.
But that's just one of those things that looking back, it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's why I have so many speeding tickets.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, okay, putting these together.
Yeah. But so, and also, I like to call myself a Kichiwe, which is a word for storyteller in the Crow language.
I love
And
that.
um, it's one that the Crow, like most others, are ones where you get a name, and I've never been through a naming ceremony, so it might be completely forfeiture. It might be complete fraud, I think, to use that name for myself. But I call myself rather than the. And it's at least partially because it's a way I can keep sharing and doing my part. There's a saying that people in the witchy circles, the manifestation circles, have started saying that the ancestors have prepared a place for you and you have but to bring yourself in line to it. I'm probably butchering it, but regardless, um, and as soon as I started doing that, life started working out a lot better for me.
Hmm.
I started going through and taking the Crow language course because it was the first year they offered it online. And I'm still not really good, but I'm much better than I
Yeah.
was.
It's
Um,
all about those steps to get there.
and as I'm going through and reconnecting, just the more I get into it, the more I do, the more I work with that, the more that because at this point I've got a very teeny tiny platform. Like I can't even stand on it. I can kind of like hang off of it with the edge of my fingers. So not really a platform, more like a ledge. Um, but
I
it's
don't
still
agree with that. I feel like other people in the chat would agree that you are making an impact on the community. Hence why you're on this show, because you
I
are a
appreciate
voice
that.
for all of us, people who are indigenous and who don't feel represented, and just being at the forefront is so important.
I
It's
wouldn't
like
even say I'm at the forefront. I'm somewhere in there, sure, but I'm there are much louder voices than me. I am a very loud person. Not even by nature, just because
and Pluto Cleric says you are making an impact. I
thank
agree.
you, Pluto. Um, but just because I'm I'm loud and among other things I'm male, and so that means that I still do have at least some small measure of privilege, even not being perfectly white. So I can at least be loud in public
Yes.
spaces and be like, no, no, I would like to say my piece now. And
Hmm.
also, again, as I've said, I'm kind of a narcissist. I like to hear myself talk. And I don't know if you can tell because I hide it really well, but I'm pretty dramatic. Um,
What? No.
and so, like, if I get a spotlight, I'm like, no, the stage is mine, and you're going to wait until I'm done with my show. Uh, which is basically how I sell because I work with makeup companies too.
Yes,
You know,
Vampire Cosmetics is one of
yes,
them.
Vampire Cosmetics, they're a wonderful company. They've treated me very well. I love working with them and I love selling for them.
And you've done
But
some of the graphic design work,
I have,
correct?
I have, I also, not these days, but for a long, long time, every word they ever put out, I had at least edited if I hadn't written it.
Hmm.
Um, but and it's interesting because I've done a couple other things in life. Like I've been a salesman, I've been a canvasser, I've done this, that, and the other. And um I I love uh something that they taught me when you're a canvasser is that a narrative, a story is an important part of any sales pitch. Um and I knew that when you're selling person to person that it works out better if you make an experience. I have sold so many makeup palettes to people who I know they went home and immediately put it on a shelf and will never touch it again
Hmm.
because they bought the experience. Um, they bought me,
Hmm.
uh, and
You
that's a
sold
very
it. You sold it.
yes, and but part of that is the storytelling that
Hmm.
goes into it, and what they teach you when you're a canvasser is that you're trying to make the person feel like the hero of the story. And I worked with companies that worked with good companies like Amnesty International. I uh, Save the Children, a couple others, and they teach you that one of the things that you have to remember is that you are doing a good thing in the world. Yes, you're trying to get people's money, but you're not trying to convert anyone. You're not going hard, but you do better when you make them feel good about it because you're doing a good thing.
Yeah.
And it is such a huge part of not just that, because I started thinking from that storytelling is such a huge part of our lives. How many days go by? where we don't tell some kind of story. Even, on those days when we're standing in the mirror and we're hunched over and, maybe we're hungover, maybe it's just a bad morning and we don't want
Yeah.
to go to work. And you look up at the mirror and you're like, you're going to do it and you're going to be great because you don't have a goddamn choice. That's a story.
Mhm.
And, you know, you go to work and when you're talking to people, a lot of the times you're just telling a story. You're
Mhm.
just telling a story about what happened last night. You're telling a joke. A joke is a story that's funny. And it really is just a part of life that sinks in to everything.
Yeah.
One of my best friends once called me an undercaffeinated BS artist, and I've just globbed onto that and kept it ever since because, well, I mean, what else is a storyteller but undercaffeinated BS artist? And God knows I am constantly undercaffeinated. Hello, crafty kaiju.
Hello, hello. Welcome in. Think of
And
every meeting with your boss, every presentation, everyone telling
exactly.
story. That's true. The wine lipsticks are okay. I will say I'm not wearing it today, but I've been wearing those a lot because they again, and I will say that Logan sold me on it because of the fact there's like, look, and it's you see it's not smearing. It's long lasting. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. This is great, especially if you wear a mask. You don't have to worry about it. I'm like, okay, but it worked. It worked, you guys. Like, because I have those and I absolutely I love it. And the eyeshadows are amazing too. Just saying, those palettes, the
Oh, yeah,
color,
absolutely.
the color output, fantastic.
And whether it's sales, a lecture, a presentation, talking to your boss, asking for a raise, all of it's a
Mm-hmm.
story. It's literally just standing there. And
Yep.
that's the difference between, those boring teachers we all hate and it's just giving you numbers and dates and, oh my God, kill me, versus the
Yes,
teachers we remember because they're better
that's
storytellers.
true. You have your favorite
Um,
teachers for sure.
mhm.
Now,
The good.
were any of those teachers like I want to know who were your biggest inspirations growing up, and or if it was just fandoms like fandoms that influenced. I know you mentioned X-Men, which X-Men was a big one for me because I felt like a mutant because I was mixed and I didn't fit in anywhere and I was a weirdo, so I was like, these mutants are like me. I'm one with these are my people, even though they're like obviously in a comic book, but I felt that they were relatable because that's how I felt. But I'm curious for you, who were your inspirations?
So, obviously, yeah, Wolverine did shape at least part of my life. Again, I am convinced that's why I'm short and mad about it. But also, so my biggest influence, I love to say that because I live and work, I've literally lived and worked in Hollywood before. I've met a lot of people. Um, I've never had a problem talking to almost anyone.
Mhm.
There is one person who would shut me up by their appearance, and that's Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman is like the only person in the world that I would be um and like I've met some of my favorite artists. Like my friend Bill was half of
Yes.
Nox Arcana, and that was one of my favorite bands growing up. Um Maybe not growing up, but at least in my teenage
Yeah.
years. And I absolutely loved their work because I would have that on while I was
So good.
writing on Guy Online, especially
Hmm.
writing for different characters. And when we got to Los Angeles, I happened to get a chance to talk to him. He's become one of my very best friends. I actually was selling for
Such a
him for a
sweetheart.
little while at conventions, and um, I loved pulling a trick where I would, oh yeah, the people would come up and I'm like, you like Nox Arcana? Oh yeah, of course. Oh, he's such a sweetheart. Oh my God, you know him? And he's standing over here. He's the most charismatic person, and I'm like, yeah, he's a great guy. He's right here. And so many times the people would go and not be able to talk.
Yeah.
And ah, look who's in
Oh,
the
look at
chat.
and we summoned you.
I am powerful. Look at that.
We're
And
just
thank
bragging
you,
about you.
Occupational Hazard. Yes, I am actually. Um, and the only person for who that I know of that I can think of who would make me do that is Neil Gaiman.
Hmm.
Second would be oh God, he's one of my favorite authors. Alan Moore. It took me a
Okay.
second. and he's a much
Amazing.
scarier individual, but I
He's
feel
so
like I could talk
scary.
to him. Oh
The
yeah,
difference.
big bird and
Yeah.
grrr. Neil Gaiman's this tiny guy, but Neil Gaiman is just my biggest inspiration as an author, as a
Hmm.
writer, as a creative. I love reading his stuff, and it does help that he is so active in talking to his fans. And I've read not every word that he's ever written, because God, the man's prolific. Um, but I've read a lot of them, and he is inspirational. But other than that, one of my biggest favorites. So I'm a huge dork, and when I was growing up, my favorite stories, like the ones I was like, I want to be these people, were the Knights of the Round Table.
Wow. Okay. Was there a
Like,
particular knight?
Galahad, actually.
Galahad. Oh, and why is
He
that? I want to know.
he was okay, so Lancelot was the strongest, King Arthur was the
Hmm.
leader. Galahad was the one who was pure. Galahad,
Yeah.
where Lancelot could considered a trope namer for nice guy TM. Galahad was an actual nice guy, and that appealed to me. Um, that was before I was a teenager and I was a shithead and maybe even a borderline incel for a little while. Um, Growing up in Kansas does terrible things to you. Uh, but like, and after that, I think my biggest influence was Ben Franklin, um,
I
because
would not have expected you to say Ben Franklin.
he was my favorite founding father, because
Interesting.
I heard an anecdotal story, and I have no
Okay.
idea if this is historically accurate, but
Hmm.
someone once said, "Hey, do you ever think about running for politics?" And the idea frightened him so much, he ran away to France and almost never came back. Spent the entire time there just being positively Dionysian, partying, banging, and just getting paid for it. And I'm like, okay, that sounds awesome. I am down with that.
I love that. That was the story that was like sold you. That was it. Now
I'm
I
like,
need a. Is there a movie that talks about like now I need a movie that focuses on this whole experience of party boy Franklin. That's what
there isn't, but there really should be, actually, come to think of it.
I'm like, is that why they say when you make it rain, the Franklins? Is that why? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just
I'm
kidding.
almost convinced that's why he's on the $100 bill, because
Right?
he
It's like
was
making it rain.
the exact opposite of an austerity politics person.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't know about that, but you can find all sorts of treatises on why you should take an older woman as a mistress.
Ooh, you heard it here, folks. Now going back to getting into more of the Coyote and Crow because now you have been working with the team there. And
Mhm.
can you kind of share as far as what it is that you do? I know that you also too wrote stories for them, but are you there in a different capacity as well?
So
With them.
right now, I call myself a contributing writer because I've worked
Hmm.
pretty heavily with Connor and some of the other
Hmm.
team. And I've done a lot. Like, I'm the one who wrote their, actually with Connor's help, the errata, and I've written a couple of stories, and I'm involved with a couple other things behind the scenes. Like, I am, I can't say too much more, but I can
Hmm.
say that uh, if you go to conventions, if you've ever been to conventions for Coyote and Crow, you would have seen this mug telling stories. If you go online, chances are pretty good, if it's involved officially at all, you'll see this mug. And chances are pretty good that going forward, you're going to see this mug for anything telling stories in Coyote and Crow spaces. Like,
And you did some
uh,
storytelling at Gen Con as well.
I did. Oh God, I loved that. I really enjoyed the Gen Con storytelling because not everybody who signed up knew what they were getting into.
Hmm.
And the people who didn't, afterwards they were like, "Can we buy this book?" And I was like, "Unfortunately, you can't here, but go to the website and you can get it there." Um, and it's really good knowing that you gave someone an
Yeah,
experience strong enough that they then want to go and buy the book and experience the stories and the culture, and
it's
they want to make
amazing.
it their own. And I'm I'm working on a couple other things behind the scenes that um
Yeah, I was looking at the. Thank you, Robert.
so there's a lot of crying. Um there's
Yes.
a
Oh,
lot
by the way,
of
for those who might be listening later on, or right now and can't see the chat, Robert Tables asked, what is it day to day, week to week experience of a writer? What are deadlines like? How do you submit things? What tools are common? Just so then that way everyone is on the same
so I've
page.
done a lot of different kinds of writing. I've written for publications, I've written freelance, I've written in-house, I've done copywriting, I've done narrative, I've done persuasive, I've done sales, I've done a lot.
Hmm.
And when you're dealing with deadlines are different, but one of the strongest things you can do is be like, I am quick with a deadline. And the second best thing you can do is be like, I am communicative, because most of the time deadlines can be expanded by a little bit. Maybe you should never go in with the idea of that, but
Hmm.
people understand that you're a person, and the sooner you can tell someone, hey, I looked at my timeline, I'm not going to get this done by the deadline, or if I do, it's going to be really shitty. A lot of times people will say, hey, thanks for, take another few days, take a week, thanks for being so, because the amount of times that people just get to the deadline and they've known for a week that they're not going to get done, and they
Yeah.
don't, you know, tell the person. Now, you know,
Yes.
typically you've got not just the person you're working with, but chances are the client has someone over here waiting for it and someone over here waiting for it, especially if you're writing as part of a team. You've got a letterer or you've got a layout person who's waiting on it. And if they knew that they weren't going to have it, they could have, changed focus and worked with someone else. And then, it just took yours, but now they don't have it, and now you're not just fucking up your timeline and somebody else's, you're fucking up
Yeah.
potential entire companies. And like, life happens, most people understand that. Most, not everyone. And
Yes.
again,
Depending on the situation and the company.
uh and like I said, there's a lot of crying. I spend I'm actually a pretty fast writer when I get down to it. um And bad news early is way better than unfinished at the finish line. God, that is amazing.
Hmm.
That's true for everything. That's a perfect
Yes.
way to say it. But uh so I'm actually a pretty fast writer because I spend, and this is something else that Neil talks about that I love. I spend hours and hours staring at a blank page and doing nothing, and I'm never going to do this. I can't do this. Why am
Hmm.
I trying? I just need to go get a job at McDonald's. Fuck! I have no marketable skills. Everything is
Oh.
terrible. Um, but Neil Gaiman said that, and then the next day I got it done very quickly, but I couldn't have got there without going through the first part. And that's
Hmm.
very true for me as well, that I cannot get to the point where everything flows and it comes out easy without
Yeah.
suffering terribly. And as for what tools are common, uh, Microsoft Word,
Hmm.
Google, I prefer Google to Microsoft if it comes down to it, but um, Slack. Oh, everybody loves Slack. I hate Slack. I hate Slack. I
I'm
don't know
still
why.
learning Slack. I'm not an expert on Slack. Still
I
learning.
can do it. I use it, but honestly, most of the time, Discord has better functionality for what they're
Hmm.
asking, and it's like, why don't we just use that? Oh, because Discord's just for gaming. Sure, fine, whatever. Um, and Airtable's another workflow app that's pretty common. There's a bunch of them, and different
Yeah.
people, different companies, different have different things, and I'm kind of a chameleon in that I grew up poor, so I did grow up with the mindset of I agree to everything and figure out how to get it done, even if it's gonna suck.
Oh,
Um,
that's relatable. That is so relatable right there.
and I'm trying to get better about that,
Mhm.
but
We
yeah,
were
that's what
talking about
that's
that
like.
balance, like finding that balance. It's like we want to say yes to everything, but then you also too don't want to burn out, and you
You
can
don't
burn
want to
out
burn out, and
so
at the end of the day, you
quickly.
still need to eat.
Yes, food,
Unfortunately,
food. Now, okay, this kind of leads into since Robert was talking about more of the writing aspect, but just in general, this is something that I've been asking every guest, and it's something that it's going to be a common thread because everybody has a different answer, and I think that's the beauty because everyone's journey is so different. Um, what is the best advice? And it could be, it doesn't matter if it's acting, if it was for writing, if it was within the ttrpg space. What is the best advice you've received?
Honestly, the best advice I received is from my friend Rachel, and um, she's another writer, and I know a ton of Rachels, and but uh, she told me that no matter what, you can all get something on the page because you can always edit it later, but you can never edit a blank page.
Ooh,
And I'm like, that's so right. So
that is
literally,
so
there are times
right.
that I will just sit there and type out absolute nonsense, and maybe somehow I'll stumble into something, but at the very least, it's not as intimidating as the blank page. Um, like even if I'm staring at lorem ipsum dolor, uh, that's less intimidating than the blank page. I don't use that anymore, but I did. That was one of the first things I did was fuck it, throw lorem ipsum in there and just go from there. But yeah, 9 times out of 10, your first draft isn't going to
Mm-hmm.
be your last. So if you can, yeah, exactly, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get something down, it doesn't matter if it's
Yes.
crappy because you've still got time to fix it. And yeah, a blank canvas is terrifying. A blank canvas is maybe a little different. I'm not a painter. I'm not real
Mm-hmm.
visual, which bothers me sometimes. But I don't know if you can go through and edit a painting, um, not without a lot of
Yeah,
whiteout.
a lot.
But when it comes to writing, at least before you publish it,
Yeah.
and I've been on your side of the interviewing often enough that I got to ask this of a very well-known writer once. Like, after you publish it, 9 times out of 10, you can't go back and you can't change it. But
Yes.
before then, everything is changeable. Everything is
Mm.
editable. And right now, I'm still editing a piece that I don't that it's really hard for me to go back to a piece that I thought
Yes.
was done and then be like, okay, got to come back to this now. I hate it.
It's like stress. It's that
Uh,
feeling.
but yeah, YOLO driven first draft. I love that.
But it's so true. It's like just putting pen to paper, or or if you're if you're someone who writes things out, or if you're someone who is at the computer, it's just, I think that also too, that goes back to wanting it to be perfect right away, when it's a process. From start to finish. It's not just like, and perfection, right? I mean, it's, who knows? It could be. That's amazing if that's how some people are just like, they think about it and then bam, it's just no editing is needed, nothing is needed to be done. But that's, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone who is a writer who said that that's the situation. That they're just like,
I've
that was it,
I
perfect.
was once told writing is the easiest thing in the world, and if he's never done anything with it, he's never going to do anything with it. And that fucked me up for years because that was from somebody who was involved with something that I really loved.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
I'm not going to say too much more about it than that, but that was so disheartening.
Hmm.
And these days, I look back at it, and so many people have told me, no, that person was insane. And I'm like, oh, well, old entitled people tend to be. So, yeah. And I kind of refiled it under, if you're not depending on, if you've got enough money in the bank account to
Hmm.
eat tonight, yeah, it's probably a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure.
And since then, that's been something, ooh, I like that. Nothing exists until the DM wills it. I prefer to phrase that as I am God, but
Or say in the language that I'm used to you saying it in.
Badatia, which
It's
means
that just has a
God.
different. It just has a different flavor too.
It does. Uh, and that is something that I do love to say to my players anytime I'm playing. It's like I am God, and that's a good thing and a bad thing for them because I've got a very simple way of dealing with rule kerfuffles. 30 seconds, and if we can't come to an agreement, I am God. This is how we're doing it now. We'll look it up in the book after. just because I'm not gonna. The book is a guideline. Even
Hmm.
Coyote and Crow,
Yes.
I am God, and this is how we're doing it this time. Because I think that that way we can get back to having fun a lot more quickly than
It's
if we
true.
have to sit here and look up how big your fireball actually is going to be. And
Spend
I
all
think,
that time looking that up and figuring out the parameters of the spell and
and
everything
I think
else.
that's just a lot better for everyone.
Oh yeah, especially for the story. Going back to
Because
that.
everything is about a story.
Yes. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about the fact that you obviously, in which I hope that some of you guys in chat have already been watching, you are running a fantastic Coyote and Crow campaign on our channel. And it's, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's always a joy to watch you guys and telling this story together because it is joint storytelling. It really is. Can you share a little bit about the story that you're telling for those who may not have seen it yet? Kind of the premise of the story, and like maybe if there's some non-spoiler stuff to kind of like keep
Sure.
an eye out for in the next few episodes or so.
So right now we are running through sort of an expanded version of the story I wrote for Stories of the Freelance. And I say expanded because really all I'm doing is letting the players talk and explore more than they might. I wrote it with the idea that it could serve as kind of an intro to Cahokia where people could go from one end to the other trying to figure out this mystery. And the basic premise is that a comedian, which in the world of Coyote and Crow is much more important because
Mm-hmm.
comedians are healers, comedians are respected individuals in a community. Um, a comedian has been accused of something, and it's up to the players to try to clear his name. And before all is said and done, uh, the players get in some interesting situations where they have to answer some questions because I love hard questions. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah,
I've been victim to some of those hard questions
oh, I
before.
love it. Although the question seems, if the question is, do the do does this person need stabbing? Komeha's answer seems to be yes.
Yes, it's always the stabby stab. Always the stabby stab. It says Robert Table says to the story, the DM and GM has a story to tell, but the players have a story to make. Where do you find balance between essential beats versus player agency?
So to answer very quickly, because I don't know how much time we have left,
Oh,
Uda.
still have a little bit of time. Just a
Okay,
little, yeah.
okay. So in which case, the way I prepare for a game isn't as much as other people do. I spend a lot more time thinking than I do necessarily writing down because when I go in and I'm running for a group, I I do have story beats, and that's exactly how I describe it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got story beats. I want A to happen, I want B to happen, I want C to happen. Um, and the way I deal with it is I don't write down too much ahead of time. Like I'll have names, I'll have characters that I want to introduce, and I'll have points I want them to get to. Um, but I also love to tell them that, hey, it's your story. You want to go hunt dragon eggs all game? We can do that. Um, and yeah, Udhima's heard that a couple of times at
Yeah.
this point. Um, and I I uh, I just build the world around them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, if we can, we're still going to hit my story beats. And that's why I
Mm-hmm.
love leaving them as beats rather than this is what's going to happen. Because if they're just beats, that can happen almost anywhere, unless they do something really crazy, which, players are
Could
going to
happen.
fucking do anyway. Uh, but I, um, and writing
Mm-hmm.
modules a little different. I like to do the threefold path, which is basically players get three options, and then hopefully between those, uh, story guides running it later can kind of figure out what they want to do. But yeah, I just like building it around them. I might decide they're going to meet this person and they're going to meet this person and maybe they'll have a fight here and maybe they come across this individual here and originally I might figure, oh, this is totally going to happen in an office building, and then it happens at a coffee shop. um which,
That
okay,
sounds familiar.
does it? But because the players are going to have fun,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we're doing this. I'm a big
Definitely.
proponent of the story, and you're gonna get a better story that way. Uh, just because this is a collaborative game.
It
It doesn't
is.
matter which one we're talking about. D&D, Coyote and Crow, Vampire the Masquerade, maybe Vampire, depending on the game. It's collaborative game, even if we're trying to screw each other over. We're telling another way I love to say it is that we're telling a story about each other to each other. Um, because if it becomes a one person show, whether that's one of the
Mm,
players or the story guide, storyteller, that's not as fun. Like,
yeah.
you are not here to go through my story. I am here to tell yours. That's how I view it.
I love that. And that's a perfect thing to end on because I think that again, I love that, that is it. It's really about the teamwork and the collaborative storytelling that makes it such a fun experience and why we keep going back to tabletop games or games in general. It's so much fun. I'm so sad that we're out of time for today. I really, really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to just sit down and chat with us because this is so much fun. I say this all the time, but literally, all of you guys who have been on the show so far, we could go on for like multiple hours. But we only have the one. But that just means that we have to bring you back at some point. We got to do it. But in the meantime, so people can, and I have already put the information, but I'll put it again in the chat so you can go ahead and support Logan. Everywhere on the social medias and also his website to see his amazing work. But if you could please let everyone know again where they can find you, and then also to any projects, because I know you have some that are coming up that obviously don't, anything with an NDA will, ixnay on that. But anything else you can share with us?
So, I can be found at you've got my website there. That's my portfolio. That's where I like to direct people towards. Here's what I can do, and I actually really need to update it. I can be found at Instagram, Logan Boese. That's kind of the one that I've been trying to build out a little more. I should probably do a little more with Twitter, but I'm kind of a grandpa. I can be found at Akichiwe. Um, and I've got a couple of interesting projects coming up. I've got something, I'm always doing stuff with Coyote and Crow, even if it's just streaming and running games. Um, and I know Coyote and Crow has a lot of things coming out in the near future, so keep your eye up for that. Like I know that Connor just posted a GoFundMe for helping to keep the Indian Child Welfare Act, which is super important. So if you want to do that, that's wonderful too. But other than that, like I've got most everything I'm doing right now is kind of still in the early stages of I shouldn't talk about it yet, but there is a lot coming out. So keep watching me because God knows I love stalkers. I will literally strike a pose. You come to my window. I
Oh
won't
no!
guarantee that I'm not going to start the 70s
Don't.
porn music,
Yeah.
but that's on you. At that point, you've already joined in.
Don't be a creep, guys. Just don't like do the not so stalkery creepy thing of going to his
Is
window.
it stalking if I've invited? I
That's true.
mean, isn't that half of why we play vampire?
I mean, yeah, when definitely for VTM, I think that there's a whole other rule that applies for that.
And yes,
Yes.
just because I know you kind of asked earlier, Malkavian first, Nosferatu second, Bruja third, though I've got a friend who makes a much better Bruja Primogen than I do. Koro, you're wonderful. That's
Amazing.
all.
Well, don't forget too. There's a few streams coming up. Yes.
Yes, I every first and third Tuesday, I can be found running for right here on this channel for my wonderful group. And then I've got Survive the Nightfall coming up for the Initiative Order on the 9th. And then I've got a few other streams that I generally post about on my Instagram a few days beforehand. So that's
Yay.
probably the best one to follow me at.
Yes, so be sure to follow everywhere. Follow Logan and basically look out for these awesome announcements that are on the way. Okay, folks, Power Word Talk will continue over on twitch.tv Sirenscape, where I'll be chatting with the amazing team that Rob leads through this epic Cyberpunk Red campaign, Team Sirenscape. That's going to begin at 4 p.m. Pacific time over there. And it's going to be another fun chat. This is the second part of my chat with them, so we're going to get a little bit more into the juicy campaign details and a little bit more into their characters as well. Also, a reminder to tune in to GM Raven's awesome Cyberpunk High Riders game, 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. So be sure to support their game as well. But I thank you all for all of the awesome positivity and good vibes in chat. Thank you so much. And again, happy Native American Heritage Month, everybody. It's continuing on. We're going to have some more amazing, amazing Indigenous creators, writers, and artists on. So stay tuned. And until next time, remember, we're going over to Sirenscape, 4 p.m. Pacific time. Till next time, guys. Bye.
Chinook Diaragawik.
Cybernation Uncensored.